Chapter 35. Severance. Attendances, PLZ. The peaceful, happy sounds of the villagers were shattered in an instant. A wave of intense, suffocating heat erupted from where Shizu had been standing, accompanied by a concussive blast that sent the nearby goblinas flying like ragdolls. Their cheerful chatter was cut off mid-sentence, their existence simply snuffed out by the sudden, roaring inferno. The simple wooden huts nearby, their timbers dried by the sun, began to smoke and then burst into flame, the fire spreading with terrifying speed. The other goblins, their faces masks of pure, uncomprehending terror, scrambled away, their orderly work dissolving into a frantic rush for survival. From the heart of the blaze, a raw, triumphant scream echoed through the clearing. It was not a sound of pain, but of freedom, the roar of a caged beast finally unleashed after decades of imprisonment. It didn't take long for the others to react. Caval and Guido, who had been relaxing and chatting just a few moments before, were startled by the explosion. Their first instinct was that a powerful monster had somehow bypassed their patrols and was attacking the village. But when they got a clear view of the creature floating in the pillar of fire, a higher elemental fire spirit, their eyes went wide with a dawning, horrified realization that chilled them to the bone. "Where is Shizu?" Caval yelled, his voice tight with panic as he scanned the chaos for their new companion. "I don't know," Guido shouted back, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword. "She was outside. We should go find her. She might be hurt." "No, look," Caval said, pointing a trembling finger at the floating spirit, his face pale. "Do you see that thing? Yeah, are you trying to play games right now when our lives are on the line? And Shizu's too. Where's Reinhard? Listen, damn it," Caval snapped, his adventurer's knowledge overriding his fear. "That's a superior fire elemental. That's Ifrit, the same one that was seen with the hero decades ago, Shizu, Izawa. And we have a person with us who wears a mask just like the hero did," Guido said, the pieces clicking together in his mind with sickening speed. "And her name is also Shizu. What was her full name, exactly?" "We never asked. We just called her Shizu." "How much do you want to bet?" Caval said, his voice dropping to a horrified whisper, "that her full name is Shizu Izawa." "What?" As if to confirm their worst fears, one of the goblinas who had been near Shizu, her simple clothes smoldering and her skin red with burns, stumbled toward them. "Miss Shizu," she cried, tears streaming down her soot-stained face. "It's Miss Shizu. She was helping us, and then she was in so much pain, and then, she turned into that thing." Rimuru was in a meeting with the dwarven brothers inside their forge, discussing plans for a new, more advanced furnace, when the sudden, violent explosion of magicals rattled the entire structure. Great Sage immediately alerted him, its voice calm and analytical in his mind. "Warning. A high-energy individual with immense magicul reserves has materialized within the village." His thoughts raced as he burst out of the forge and saw the pillar of fire consuming the heart of his home. He didn't even wait to assess the situation. He shouted to the nearest hobgoblin, his voice a commanding roar that cut through the panic. "Reinhard! Evacuate everyone. Get them outside the village. Take the children, now." The workers and villagers were in a frantic rush, but Reinhard and the hobgoblin riders immediately took charge, their training kicking in. They began herding the terrified goblins away from the blaze, creating a perimeter and getting the non-combatants to safety with a disciplined efficiency born of their recent evolution. At the same time, Reinhard emerged from the communal cooking area, Ellen right behind him, her face which had confusion written all over it seeing flames and explosions. "What's happening?" she yelled over the roar of the flames. "An attack, it seems," Reinhard said, his gaze fixed on the floating, fiery figure of Ifrit. His not-so-calm demeanor changed as he saw Ifrit. He turned to her. "Ellen, take the others to a safe area." "Where are you going?" she asked, then the answer hit her with the force of a mental punch from her own self. Of course, he was going to deal with it. The question felt stupid the moment it left her lips. "Never mind," she said, her voice firm now, her own fear pushed aside by purpose. "I'm taking the others to safety." "Thanks," Reinhard said, and then he was gone, a silent blur moving toward the center of the inferno. Ifrit, reveling in its newfound freedom, prepared to unleash a wave of fire on the helpless, fleeing goblins below. It raised a hand, and a volley of fireballs, each a streak of incandescent rage, shot toward the terrified creatures. But before the attack could even reach its targets, a red-haired figure appeared between the fire and the goblins in the blink of an eye. He didn't raise a shield or prepare a defensive spell. He just stood there. The fireballs simply vanished as they got close to him, extinguishing as if they had hit a wall of absolute nothingness, their fiery energy consumed by an invisible force. Ifrit turned its blank, burning gaze on this new challenger. It saw no overwhelming aura, no visible magic. In its perception, he was just a frail human, standing in its way. Ifrit descended, and the ground beneath its feet scorched and turned to molten rock. Flames swirled around it, multiplying into a dozen identical copies, each one radiating the same intense, suffocating heat. They all raised their hands in unison, and a single, massive fireball began to form above them, a miniature sun growing larger and larger with each passing second, scorching the very air around it. They then launched the colossal sphere of destruction toward Reinhard, an attack meant to not only vaporize him but also incinerate all the fleeing goblins behind him. The massive ball of fire hurtled toward Reinhard. And just like before, just a few feet away from him, it simply dissipated, vanishing into thin air without a sound, its immense energy ceasing to exist. Reinhard looked up at the confused fire spirit, his expression calm. He muttered a quiet request, a whisper lost in the roar of the flames. Requesting the blessing of severance. He didn't want to just slash Ifrit apart. That would mean destroying Shizu's body in a bloody spectacle. The blessing of severance was different. It would allow him to separate one thing from another. To cut the connection, to sever the spirit from its host, leaving the body unharmed. It was the perfect tool for a delicate operation. And in the next second, he got it. Bestowing divine blessing. Severance. Chapter 36. Extracting. Attendances, PLZ. From a safe distance, Rimuru watched the chaos, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Why wasn't Reinhard burning? The fireballs, each one a condensed sphere of raw, destructive heat large enough to vaporize a normal person, were just disappearing immediately. They would hurtle through the air, roaring and crackling, and then, just a few feet from the red-haired man, they would snuff out, their light and heat vanishing into nothingness as if they had never been there to begin with at all. Great sage, he thought, his mental voice a mixture of awe and urgency because of the situation. What is happening over there? Run a full analysis. Analysis complete. Whenever a magical projectile is about to reach the individual, the projectile and its constituent magicules disappear entirely. It is highly probable that the individual possesses some form of anti-magic skill or a similar, unclassifiable ability. Rimuru was silent for a moment, his thoughts grinding to a halt. Then, he practically shouted in the private space of his own mind. Really? Are you kidding me? That's just too overpowered. So you're telling me that in this magic-based fantasy world, magic doesn't even work on him? Can you find out more about it, great sage? The name of the skill, its mechanics. Or anything at all. Error, 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 at an dollar, and dollar and dollar, and at and. Great sage, his ever-reliable, all-knowing partner, began to malfunction. Its usually calm, analytical voice dissolved into a stream of digital gibberish as its processes slammed into a wall they could not comprehend, let alone analyze. I expected too much, huh? Rimuru thought with a mental sigh. Why did I think it would work this time when it failed before? But damn, to have a skill like that. That's a true main character level cheat in a world like this. He tore his attention away from Reinhard's cheat-like skills. This wasn't the time to be fascinated or somewhat jealous. The village was still burning. He needed to be closer to help, just in case. After receiving the blessing of severance, Reinhard moved forward, walking calmly through the inferno as if it were a gentle spring rain. Ifrit and its copies, driven by pure, instinctual rage, continued their relentless bombardment. They threw fireballs, launched lances of pure flame, and created spiraling drills of incandescent energy, but it was all utterly useless. None of it did anything. The attack simply disappears before they could reach their target. In the blink of an eye, a movement too fast for even a spirit's perception, Reinhard vanished from sight and reappeared directly behind the original Ifrit. You've done enough, he said, his voice quiet but carrying an absolute finality. Ifrit suddenly felt its power, its very connection to the magicules, draining away at an alarming rate. It was getting weaker, its flames sputtering. It tried to summon a massive firestorm, to create powerful salamander spirits from the ambient heat, but nothing happened. The superior fire elemental, Ifrit, could no longer use fire. Before it could even process this new, terrifying situation, a hand closed around the back of its neck. Reinhard then, with a casual and almost insulting ease that spoke of absolute superiority, began to use the original Ifrit as a living, flaming bludgeon. He swung its body around, the spirit's roars of frustration echoing through the clearing as it was used to swat its own copies out of the air. Ifrit was completely and utterly confused. This human was touching it directly, holding its neck in an unbreakable grip, yet he wasn't being burned. He wasn't even getting warm. But it had no time to ponder this impossibility. It couldn't use its magic. It couldn't even control its own flaming body, which was now just a body. It was powerless. After a few more physical swings, the last of the copies dissipated into embers, and Reinhard stopped. He held the original Ifrit by the neck, the once mighty spirit now limp and powerless, its flames flickering weakly. "I'm sorry," Reinhard said, his voice filled with a strange, quiet sympathy. "But this is going to hurt." He turned Ifrit's back to face him, lifted it slightly, and placed his free hand on its spine. He used the blessing of severance. His hand didn't physically enter the spirit's body, it phased through its fiery form, becoming an ethereal, spiritual-like disturbance. He was not targeting the physical body of Ifrit that was now in control, he was targeting the host inside him, Shizu Izawa. Reinhard's hand closed around her spiritual form, and he began to pull. Ifrit let out a raw, tearing scream of pure, spiritual agony as Reinhard forcefully extracted its host from its very core. To any onlooker who knew the true power of a superior elemental, the scene was horrifying. They would see the mighty Ifrit, a being of immense power, being treated like a helpless fish, roaring in pain as this calm, red-haired man cruelly ripped its host from within it. They would see Reinhard as the true cruel one here if not for the situation. Rimuru was seeing it all. The disappearing fireballs, the humiliation of Ifrit being used as a weapon, and now, this. He didn't understand what Reinhard was doing, so he turned to his most reliable source once again. "Great Sage, what exactly is he doing to that spirit?" Answer. The individual appears to be forcibly separating the host from the spirit using an unknown, high-level spiritual interference skill. Rimuru didn't know he had that kind of skill, too. The only ones Great Sage had been able to identify were the mundane, mommy's boy, skills like, walking without tripping. But he remembered that Great Sage couldn't analyze the higher level ones. So he has a skill like this, too, Rimuru thought, a shiver running through his slime body. My choice not to piss him off was definitely, 100% the right one. He watched as Reinhard continued to pull Shizu's spiritual form from the struggling spirit. Great Sage, what will happen to the spirit when Reinhard is done? Answer. Without a host to anchor it to this plane, the fire spirit's constituent magicals will rapidly dissipate, and it will eventually vanish from the physical plane. An idea sparked in Rimuru's mind, a plan that was both audacious and brilliant. A plan that would not only benefit him but also permanently remove the threat to his village. Say, Great Sage, if I use my predator skill on him and swallow the spirit right after he's separated, will I get all of its abilities? Answer. Affirmative. The skill predator will allow you to acquire the spirit's intrinsic skills. Further analysis upon assimilation will yield additional abilities and resistances. Then it was decided, just as Reinhard finished extracting Shizu's unconscious, human form from Ifrit, he prepared to destroy the now weakened, hostless spirit. But before he could, a voice shouted from across the clearing, filled with a strange, eager urgency. Reinhard, throw him to me, I'll take care of it. Do it now. Reinhard looked over and saw Rimuru bouncing toward him, his slime body expanding in anticipation. He knew exactly what the slime was planning to do. Who was he to deny him the opportunity? Holding Shizu's body securely in one arm, he used the other to casually toss the weakened, powerless Ifrit through the air toward the oncoming slime. Rimuru's body swelled, becoming a massive wave of blue ooze that completely engulfed the fire spirit in a single, decisive gulp. Chapter 37. Last Talk. Attendances, PLZ. 4 days later. 4 days had passed since the fiery incident with Ifrit. Rimuru had successfully swallowed the weakened spirit, and in a way, Shizu had been saved. She had remained in a deep coma for the past 4 days, her body stable but her mind lost to the world. The village had recovered with remarkable speed. The goblinas who had been caught in the initial blast were badly burned, some beyond recognition, but Rimuru's high-grade full potions had restored them to perfect health. The trio had been amazed by the potion's potency, and they were relieved that the incident had ended without a single casualty. But then came the news about Shizu. While she was alive, she wasn't waking up. No one knew if she ever would. The trio was saddened by this, especially Ellen, who had grown surprisingly close to the quiet, masked woman in their short time together. Worse still, her health had begun to visibly decline each day. It was as if the time that had been frozen within her for so long was finally catching up, and it was clear to everyone that she might just pass away peacefully in her sleep. For Shizu, in a strange way, it was a kind of relief. She had been stopped before she could destroy this peaceful village, and she was finally being freed from her long, painful suffering. Many would think of her now as a heartless or cold person, as there were kids waiting for her to come back. Life in the village went on. The destroyed huts were rebuilt by the hobgoblins with practiced efficiency, and within a day, there was hardly any sign that a superior fire elemental had nearly burned the place to the ground. The trio continued their investigation, the routine of heading out into the forest each day a welcome distraction from the somber mood that had settled over them. Reinhard too went with them, like usual. Now on to the 5th day. Ellen found Reinhard sitting alone on a log near the edge of the village, watching the goblin children play. "Reinhard," she said, her voice small and sad. "Can't you do something about Shizu?" Reinhard looked up at her, his expression gentle but firm. "I would if I could, Ellen. However strong I am, whatever my title as Sword Saint means, I can't bring someone back from the dead, nor can I stop someone who is dying. That is an area where even I can do nothing with all my power." "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking. "It's just, I feel so useless. Everywhere, all the time." Tears began to well up in her eyes, her face turning soft and red. She had been holding it in for days, and now it was all coming out. "You aren't useless, Ellen," Reinhard said, his voice soft but sure. "You never were. Ask the kids you rescued in Oakhaven, the ones who were waiting to be killed by that demon. Ask the people you've helped on your journeys. Ask me, a stranger with an unknown past, who you welcomed into your party without hesitation. But I can't do anything," she sobbed. "I couldn't do anything while you saved us so many times. You were the one who saved that village, and you were the one who saved this one." Reinhard smiled. "Having strength doesn't mean you can help everyone, Ellen. You can take those words personally from me. I defeated a demon in that town, yes. But you, Caval, and Guido were the ones who found those people, who gave them hope, who led them out of that nightmare. If you ask them who saved them, they won't nowhere near mention my name. They will mention the three of you." He looked her in the eyes. "I did what I could with my strength. And you did what you could with yours. So don't ever think of yourself as useless. You three were the hope that those people clung to that day." Ellen listened, his words slowly sinking in. She wiped at her eyes, a small, watery laugh escaping her. "Geez, Reinhard," she said, her voice thick and softer with emotion. "You can't just say things like that, you know." She stood up, feeling a little lighter. Just as Reinhard was about to say something else, Reinhard came running toward them, his face filled with an urgent excitement like something good just happened. "Sir Reinhard," the hobgoblin chief called out. "Miss Shizu is awake. She wants to meet you." "What?" Ellen gasped, her sadness instantly replaced by a surge of joy. "She's awake. That's great news." "Yes, Miss Ellen," Reinhard confirmed. "She is awake, and she can even talk." "She wants to meet me?" Reinhard asked, a little surprised. "Yes, Sir Reinhard, she specifically requested to see you." Reinhard got to his feet. "I see. I'll go and see her, then." He looked at Ellen. "Ellen, can you please go tell Guido and Caval that she's awake?" Ellen wiped the last of her tears away, her face now bright and cheerful. "Yes, I'll go tell them right now." And with that, she took off running toward the village, not even needing to ask where they were. Reinhard made his way to the hut where Shizu was resting. Rimuru was already outside, wobbling in place. "Oh, hey Reinhard," Rimuru said as he approached bouncing with his slime body. "Good news. Shizu is awake, and she said she wants to talk to you." Reinhard nodded. "I know. Reinhard just told me." "Oh, so you already know." Reinhard gave a small nod and entered the hut. Shizu was lying on a simple bed, staring up at the ceiling. She looked frail, the vibrant life that had been artificially sustained within her for so long now fading like the colors of a sunset. But as she noticed him enter, a small, peaceful smile formed on her face. "Reinhard," she said, her voice a soft, tired whisper. "Thank you for coming." Chapter 38. Burdens and Goodbye. Attendances, PLZ. Reinhard stepped into the hut, the dim light falling on Shizu's frail form. He knew she didn't have long left. At least, now that she was awake, she would be able to face the end with open eyes. As he approached her bedside, she started with a simple, "Thank you." He looked down at her, at the way the life was slowly fading from her face. He didn't see the point in hiding from the truth. "You're dying," he said, his voice soft but direct. Shizu let out a small, weak chuckle. "And I'm not the least bit sad about it." She paused, then amended, "No, that's a lie. I'm a little bit sad. I'm going to miss all of them." "Your students?" Reinhard asked. "Yup," she confirmed. "And, thank you, for stopping me, and for getting rid of that curse that was placed upon me." A distant, haunted look came into her eyes. "I wish I'd had the chance. I doubt I could have ever done it myself. But I wish I could have had the chance to confront the person who placed it upon me." Her voice grew quiet. "He made me kill the first friend I ever made, right after he summoned me here. He never even saw me as a person. And when Ifrit took control, I thought I was going to do it all over again. Kill everyone I had grown to care for. So, thank you, for stopping me." Reinhard just nodded, listening. "So," he asked, his voice calm and serious. "Do you want me to relay your words to this person who placed this curse upon you?" Shizu looked at him, her eyes wide with surprise. "Would you? Even though you are strong, he is one of the strongest beings in this world. A demon lord." "Please, you do not have to worry about that," Reinhard said. "If you really want me to, just say the word." Tears began to well up in Shizu's eyes, sliding down her pale cheeks. The idea of placing such a heavy burden on someone she had only just met was overwhelming. Reinhard seemed to understand her thoughts. "You do not have to think of it as a burden," he said gently. "It isn't wrong to seek justice. It never is. If he truly made you suffer for all the time you have lived, if he took you from your home for his own twisted goals, then I do not mind at all carrying that wish for my friend." Shizu turned her head to look at him, her teary eyes meeting his. "A friend," she whispered. "You really do have a way with words, just like Ellen said." "If it is too hard for you to say," Reinhard continued, "you don't even have to say any sign at all, and I will consider it your trust in me, to carry those burdens of yours. I swear on my name, Reinhard van Astrea, to do anything within my power to get you justice." He stood there, his gaze unwavering, waiting for her sign. And she gave it, a small, almost imperceptible nod. She turned her face away again. "Very knightly of you, Reinhard," she whispered. "I wish I had met you, Ellen, Caval, and Guido sooner." "Me too," he said softly. "And thank you for trusting me. I won't disappoint you, I promise." "You don't have to promise," she said, her voice growing weaker. "I know, I don't have much time. Can you send Ellen and the others in? So I can say goodbye." "Of course," Reinhard said. He turned and left the hut, the weight of his new promise settling on his shoulders. Outside, he saw Rimuru, Reinhard, and the trio waiting anxiously. "Is she okay?" Ellen asked, her voice trembling. "She wants to meet the three of you," he said simply. They all nodded, and Ellen, Caval, and Guido filed into the hut, their faces a mixture of hope and dread. Rimuru looked at Reinhard, clearly curious about what they had discussed, but he didn't ask. A somber, sad atmosphere settled over the group as they waited. After a while, the trio emerged from the hut. Ellen was crying openly, while Caval and Guido were fighting back tears of their own, their faces grim. Had they really grown so close to her in just a few short days? "Hey, Rimuru," Caval said, his voice rough. "Shizu's calling for you." Rimuru braced himself. It was his turn to say goodbye. Goodbyes were always the hardest. He bounced his way into the hut. A few minutes passed in silence. Then, a new, unfamiliar voice called out from inside. "Reinhard." Reinhard, hearing the call, immediately went to the hut and pushed aside the leather flap that served as a door. Through the opening, the trio and Reinhard could see inside. Shizu was gone. In her place, standing naked in the center of the room, was a young person with long, silver blue hair. They were looking down at their new human hands in wonder. As they heard Reinhard enter, they turned around. It was Shizu's face, but it was also not. Tears were dropping uncontrollably from her eyes, but the expression was one of shock, grief, and a dawning, terrible realization. "Rimuru," Reinhard said, his voice sharp with understanding. No one understood what Reinhard was saying. Rimuru was a slime, not Shizu, or Shizu with blue hair, but they couldn't tell who was standing before them at all. The body of Shizu, which had previously lain in the room as they said their goodbyes, was now nowhere to be seen. Even Reinhard was confused upon seeing it. Still, he did not doubt his ability to recognize his master, he simply stared at the blue-haired human and waited for orders. The others, too, understood immediately as they heard the next thing from the person standing. The blue-haired figure, now clearly Rimuru, looked up at them, still crying Shizu's tears. Reinhard, he said, his new voice choked with emotion. Can I get some clothes? Why yes, Lord Rimuru, Reinhard stammered, hurrying to obey. I'll get you clothes at once. Chapter 39, Strange One. Attendances, PLZ. The trio was, to put it mildly, shocked. They stared at the small, naked figure with Shizu's face, their minds struggling to comprehend the impossible scene. But even more shocking was the realization of how this had happened. Rimuru, now wearing a shirt that was far too large for his small, childlike body, sat on the edge of the bed where Shizu had been just moments before. He had already explained what had happened, talked with her, and that Shizu had asked him to devour her. Of course, he didn't really go into full detail to explain everything they talked about, like Shizu telling him about her students and asking him to help them if possible and all that. There was no need to include that part since it wasn't relevant to this conversation in any way. But everything else he told them was the truth, and there was no way to go around it at all. So you ate her? Ellen asked, her voice a mixture of horror and disbelief. Just like you did with Ifrit? Yes, Rimuru said, his voice somber. It was the only burial I could give her. It was her final wish. I'm sorry that I didn't consult you all first. You were her party members. There wasn't anything to discuss, Kaval said, his voice rough with emotion. Shizu made her choice. It's all right. Yes, Ellen agreed, wiping a tear from her eye. But we do have to explain all of this to the guild master, Guido added, the practical one as always. Rimuru hesitated. He didn't know anything about this guild master, and the idea of a powerful human organization learning about a monster that could eat people was terrifying. Will that be all right? He asked, his concern genuine. He didn't want the guild to see him as a threat, to send adventurers after him or his village at all. There's no need to worry, Kaval assured him. We only have good things to say about you. And you helped us with our investigation too. Yes, Ellen added, you helped us way more than you can imagine. The guild doesn't really care what happens in the forest, as long as it isn't a threat to Kingdom of Bloomend or something else, Reinhard said, his voice calm and reassuring. You don't have to worry. Rimuru let out a mental sigh of relief. That's a good thing, I guess. I really don't want any problems. Don't worry, Kaval said. We'll put in a good word for you. Thanks, I'm counting on you guys. In Rimuru's mind, it was the best possible thing he could have done, forming a good relationship with the adventurers. Not to mention, it was thanks to them that he got to meet Shizu and everything that followed. They were supposed to part ways then, but as the trio prepared to depart for Bloomend, Reinhard announced that he wasn't going with them. After a brief, confusing discussion, they agreed to go on without him, promising to come back after they delivered their report. Rimuru suggested they take goblin riders to make their journey faster and safer, an offer they gratefully accepted. Rimuru, take care of Reinhard until we get back. Ellen called out over her shoulder as they left, waving goodbye to both Rimuru and Reinhard. Rimuru didn't know what to make of that or even think. They want me to take care of him. The guy who is way stronger and more dangerous than I am. Thank you, but your worries aren't needed in this. After they were gone, he turned to Reinhard. So, what are you going to do? I have to investigate something else in the forest, Reinhard replied. To see if everything is normal. But isn't it? You all searched for a week and a half and found nothing. We didn't go that deep, Reinhard said. I'm going to go much deeper, possibly to the other side of the forest, to make sure it's safe. What? But that could take weeks, or even longer. Rimuru exclaimed. So you won't be staying in the village? Reinhard smiled. Yup, I'll probably be outside for a while. And you don't have to worry about the travel. Even though I might not look it, I'm very fast. Sorry, Reinhard, Rimuru thought. I've learned my lesson about you. I will never judge you by your looks again. I believe you. Do you need any help? Rimuru offered. I could send some goblin riders with you. Or I could come with you. Reinhard shook his head. I'm grateful for all your help, but you don't have to go that far. I'll be fine on my own. Somehow, I don't doubt that at all, Rimuru thought. And with that, Reinhard left, disappearing into the forest without another word. He didn't rest, he just went straight back to his mission. His knowledge of this world was limited, but he knew enough. He knew there was an impending doom, a tragedy about to befall the ogre village. And he was just hoping he wouldn't be too late to stop it. Reinhard moved through the forest at an incredible speed, a silent blur leaping from tree to tree. He wasn't going at his absolute top speed, but he was still covering ground at a pace that would have been impossible for anyone else. As he passed through a particularly dark and twisted section of the woods, he sensed a presence. A single individual, talking to themselves, their voice a strange, high-pitched cackle. It won't be long now. Ha ha ha, it won't be long. Reinhard changed course, silently dropping to the ground a few feet away from the source of the voice. He saw a small, strange figure in a cream-white magician's hat and coat. A mask with two round lenses and a duck-like mouth covered its face, and pointed, pale purple ears stuck out from the sides. It was holding a cane with a golden handle. The moment Reinhard landed, the figure spun around, its strange mask fixed on him. "Huh, a human," it squeaked, its voice filled with surprise and suspicion. "How did you get here?" "No, a bigger question. How did you even get behind me without me sensing you?" "Who are you?" Chapter 40. Perfect entry. Attendances, PLZ. "Huh, a human," the masked being squeaked, its voice filled with surprise and suspicion. "How did you get here?" Reinhard instantly recognized him. This was the one he'd heard shouting, the one whose manic laughter still echoed in his mind. This was the puppet master, the one who had set the entire orc disaster in motion just to serve the ambitions of a demon lord. This was Gelmid. It was truly, deeply unlucky for the Majin that the one person in this world who knew exactly what he was and what he was planning was the one to stumble upon him in this dark corner of the forest. "Gelmid," Reinhard said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. It wasn't a question, it was a statement of fact. Gelmid stared at him, his strange masked face tilting in confusion, a flicker of suspicion in his eyes. "What? How do you know my name? Don't tell me he sent you after me." "I don't care who you work for," Reinhard said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I know what you are doing here, and I know what purpose you are doing it for. So, I'm only going to say this once. Surrender, and stop whatever you are doing right now." Gelmud's panicked confusion instantly boiled over into pure, sputtering rage. "What? Me, surrender? To a human?" He spat the word like it was poison. "So you weren't sent by him? Me, the great Lord Gelmud, surrendering to you? I don't know what you were thinking, finding me and then saying such ridiculous things. First, those weakling ogres refused my great and generous offer, and now I have to deal with you. This day can't possibly get any worse." He raised his cane, a cackling, unhinged laugh escaping him as he prepared to obliterate the foolish human. "Ha ha ha ha, Deathmark dance." Nothing happened. The air remained still. The leaves didn't even rustle. Gelmud said, his laugh cutting off abruptly. "What? Deathmark dance?" Still nothing. "Deathmark dance." He tried again, a clear note of panic entering his voice now. The spell simply wouldn't activate. Confused and growing desperate, he tried something else, something simpler. "Magic bullet," he shouted, pointing his cane directly at Reinhard. "Not even a spark." "If you're trying to use magic," Reinhard said, his voice calm and almost conversational, "don't. It won't work." What the hell are you talking about?" Gelmud shrieked, then began to frantically spam his spells, his voice growing higher and more panicked with each failure. "Deathmark rain." Nothing. "Magic bullet." Still nothing. "Deathmark rain." And nothing once again. After a few more futile attempts, a profound weakness washed over him, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He focused on his own magical power, and his non-existent blood ran cold. His reserves, which as a greater Majin should have been vast, were almost completely empty. It was impossible. Gelmud sank to one knee, exhausted and utterly baffled. "What happened?" he wheezed. "What did you do to me? Is this an illusion? But how? I'm a greater Majin. I shouldn't be affected by some low-level illusion." Reinhard let out a soft sigh. "Now, will you surrender quietly?" His eyes, previously calm, turned as sharp and cold as steel. "And what did you just say about the ogres?" The humiliation was too much for Gelmud to bear. A mere human, asking him, the great Lord Gelmud, to surrender. Unthinkable. He decided to stall, to try and figure out what was happening. He let out a sneering laugh. "Ha ha ha ha. Well, what can I tell you? I tried to give them the greatest honor. The honor of being named by me, of serving under me. And what did they do? They refused. They refused me. So now, their stupid little village is probably being trampled by 10,000 marching orcs as we speak. Ha ha ha. As he spoke, he finally deduced what must be happening. The man in front of him had no presence, no magic, nothing. He had to be a normal human. Someone else, a powerful third party, must be hiding nearby, using some kind of advanced magic draining skill on him. Gelmid gripped his cane, preparing to spin around and launch a surprise attack on this hidden enemy. But the man was no longer in front of him. He was behind him. As Gelmid turned, a hand flashed out in a clean, diagonal slash. The world tilted sideways, his vision grew dim, and he felt a strange, detached sensation as his head was severed from his body by a single, simple hand strike. I think that was a, no, then, Reinhard said to the falling corpse. The body of the great Lord Gelmid hit the ground with a dull thump, blood pooling around it in the dirt. Reinhard vanished from the spot, his next destination already clear in his mind. The sun had set, he had to move fast. He shot through the forest like a beam of white light, a blur of motion that even the sharpest eyes would miss. The ogre village was under attack. Normally, a small band of orcs would be no match for the powerful and proud ogres. But this was not a small band. This was an army, a horde, fully equipped with heavy armor and brutal weapons, a tide of rage that crashed against their homes. For every orc and ogre cut down, 2 more took its place, their eyes burning with a strange, unnatural hunger. They were being overwhelmed by sheer, unending numbers. The orcs were even devouring their own dead, and the ogres they managed to kill, growing stronger and more frenzied with each gruesome bite. The pink-haired ogre princess ran, her heart pounding with terror. An orc in heavy, spiked armor was chasing her, its heavy footsteps shaking the ground, its weapon raised, its eyes burning with a singular, hungry focus. Her foot stumbled on a rock, falling hard to the ground. She looked back and saw the orc bearing down on her, its massive blade rising high, preparing to fall and end her life. She closed her eyes, and with her last breath, screamed the only name she could think of, a desperate plea for anything, she shouted. Brother. Her brother didn't come, but someone else did. Like a shooting star falling from the sky, a figure dropped from the sky, landing silently between the princess and the charging orc. A single, almost invisible line of light appeared on the orc's body, and then it, along with its heavy iron armor, split cleanly in two, the 2 halves falling straight to the ground on either side of the newcomer. The ogre princess, who had been bracing for the killing blow, felt nothing. She slowly opened her eyes and saw a tall, red-haired man in an immaculate white knight's uniform standing over her, his back to her. His hair in white knight uniform ruffled even when there was no wind to do that. Are you okay? He asked, his voice calm and steady, carrying a peaceful tone in the surrounding chaos of battle. Chapter 41. Obliteration. Attendances, PLZ. Everything had happened so suddenly. There had been no warning, no time to prepare for a surprise attack, and certainly not from orcs. Even if a traveler had come to their village a week ago and told them an orc army was on its way, they would have laughed. Ogres were vastly stronger than orcs, it was a simple, undisputed fact of the forest. The idea of an orc invasion was a ridiculous joke. But never, not even in their worst nightmares, did they imagine the orcs would dare to attack them on their own land, and in such ridiculous, overwhelming numbers. The pink-haired ogre princess, still on the ground, looked up at the man who had just saved her. His red hair and white clothes seemed to glow in the dim, flickering light of the burning village, ruffling as if in a wind that wasn't there. Thank you, she stammered, her mind still reeling from the near-death experience, a torrent of gratitude and confusion washing over her. Thank you for saving me. In her shock, she didn't even question what a lone human was doing here, in the middle of a monster battlefield, at a time like this. Before she could say anything more, a calm, steady voice asked, "Can you walk?" She was still on the ground, her fine clothes now dirty and torn, but that was the last thing on her mind. "Why yes, I can," she said, shakily pushing herself to her feet. My brother, my friends. Please, don't worry," the man said, his voice a comforting anchor in the chaos. "I will see if they are okay and save them." He then turned, his gaze falling on the fresh wave of orcs that were now charging toward them, their crude axes raised. He bent down and picked up a katana that was lying in the mud, its blade caked with dirt, likely dropped by an ogre running in here or a fallen ogre. He looked at the oncoming horde, a sea of hungry monsters. Then he vanished. In the next instant, the charging orcs were cut down. Heads were sent flying through the air, bodies were bisected with clean, effortless strokes. The princess could only watch in stunned silence. There was no reasoning with these orcs. Their eyes showed nothing but a single-minded, ravenous hunger, a desire to consume everything in their path, alive or dead, even their own fallen comrades. The orc army numbered in the tens of thousands. The ogre village was small, with only a few hundred inhabitants. Even 1,000 orcs would have been more than enough to overrun them, especially an army that felt no fear and devoured everything in its path. The princess could only watch, her mind struggling to keep up. In one blink, she was looking at the back of the red-haired man. In the next, all she saw were the dismembered bodies of orcs falling to the ground, cut to pieces. No matter how many charged toward her, they were all dead before they could get within 10 feet of her. Reinhard made his way deeper into the burning village, a silent, deadly whirlwind of steel. He saw a red-haired ogre, his back against a burning hut, a massive blade in his hands, desperately fighting off wave after wave of orcs. He was protecting a small group of ogre children who were huddled behind him, crying in terror. "You filthy pigs!" the ogre roared, his great sword cleaving an orc in two. But for every one he cut down, 2 more took its place. He was strong, powerful, but he was being worn down by the sheer, unending numbers. He wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. Just as he was gasping for breath, a calm voice spoke from right behind him. "Need a hand?" A flash of white swept past him, and the dozen orcs that had been about to overwhelm him were suddenly cut to pieces, their bodies collapsing to the ground in a bloody heap. The one who had saved him was gone before the ogre even saw his face. He sank to one knee, finally able to catch his breath, before forcing himself to stand again. The fight wasn't over. Reinhard moved through the village, a phantom of death, clearing out the orcs one pocket at a time. The surviving ogres, fighting for their lives in desperate groups, would just hear a quiet voice from behind them, and then the monsters they were fighting would fall dead, never even seeing what had hit them. Within a minute, the 2,000 orcs that had been rampaging through their home were all dead. But the village, while cleared of the immediate threat, was not yet safe. Reinhard walked to the edge of the village, to the wide, trampled path the orcs had used to invade. Beyond, stretching as far as the eye could see in the pale moonlight, was the rest of their army. Thousands upon thousands of them, a silent, waiting sea of orcs and their armors, their hungry eyes fixed on the burning village. The ogres he had saved, drawn by the sudden, eerie silence, made their way to the edge of the village. They saw him then, a single man, a human, in pristine white clothes, standing between their ruined homes and the largest army of orcs they had ever seen. Reinhard stood there, the borrowed, dirt-caked katana held loosely in his hand. "I presume surrender wasn't an option to begin with," he said, his voice quiet but carrying over the unnatural silence of the battlefield. "I had hoped to resolve this more easily, but it's too late now. You have already killed so many innocents." He took a simple, ready stance, and the world around him began to change. He began to draw in the magicals from the surroundings, from the air, from the earth, from everywhere. The dark clearing began to glow, the light centering on him, growing brighter and brighter and brighter until he was a shining beacon in the darkness, a figure of pure, radiant power. To the ogres watching, their hearts filled with a mixture of terror and awe at seeing something incredible they haven't seen in their life, he looked like an avenging angel descending upon the battlefield. The magicals swirled around him, a torrent of power that flowed up into the sky, creating a pillar of light that seemed to touch the sky. And then, for a single, breathtaking moment, the world lost its color. A flash of light so brilliant it bleached everything white, silencing all sound, a moment of absolute, deafening stillness. And then, a boom that shook the very foundations of the forest. A beam of pure, white energy erupted from the katana, a wave of destruction that shone like a new star in the night sky. It shot forward, vaporizing everything in its path. The orcs, their eyes filled with nothing but a mindless hunger, simply ceased to exist. Their bodies, their armor, their weapons, all of it was erased from the living world. This was not the small, controlled blast he had used on the spiders. This was an attack that would span kilometers, a wave of absolute annihilation that would not stop until every single one of the 10,000 orcs that had come to slaughter this village was wiped from this forest. Chapter 42. The Ogre's Eye. Attendances, PLZ. The blinding light, brighter than anything or more like it just sucked out the color from the world around them, illuminated the entire forest for miles and miles around. It was the aftermath of an attack so powerful it had laid waste to 8,000 orcs, erasing them from existence, while the bodies of the 2,000 who had made it into the village lay silent on the scorched earth. No ogre in the village could comprehend what they had just witnessed. What was that? How did it happen? They just couldn't understand. What followed the blinding light was an aftermath almost as terrifying as the attack itself. From Reinhard's position at the epicenter, a powerful gust of wind exploded outwards, extinguishing the remaining flames in the village and sending loose debris flying. An attack of that magnitude was bound to have consequences. The ogres, their eyes still recovering from the flash, couldn't see anything clearly. They just knew that something immense and powerful had just occurred. When the light finally faded and the wind died down, Reinhard broke his stance. He brought his hand up in front of him, looking at the borrowed katana. It had served its purpose. As he watched, the simple, mud-caked blade began to crumble, turning to dust in his hand and blowing away on the gentle breeze. "Thank you," Reinhard muttered to the fading part of it. "And I'm sorry that I asked too much of you. You did well. Rest now." It was a quiet eulogy for a simple tool that had been forced to channel an impossible amount of power. There was no joy in his voice, no sense of victory. Even though he had thwarted the attack and saved the ogre village, there were still those who had lost their lives, those who had fallen protecting their homes and their families. He turned back to the village. The fires that had been raging just moments before were now gone, extinguished by the powerful backdraft of his attack. As he turned, he saw two figures walking toward him from the center of the village, the young, red-haired ogre he had saved earlier, and an old, white-haired ogre, both clad in worn, battle-scarred armor. Behind them, the pink-haired princess and the other survivors followed, their faces a mixture of awe, fear, and profound relief. The two ogres stopped a few feet in front of him. The red-haired one's eyes locked onto Reinhard's, searching, trying to understand, to deduce anything at all about the being who stood before him. But one truth remained, and he and the other survivors were the living proof of it: this man had saved them all. The red-haired ogre placed a hand on his chest, and the old one followed his lead. It was a gesture of respect, not aggression. He then dropped to one knee, his head bowed, his gaze fixed on the ground. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough with emotion and exhaustion. "Thank you for saving my village, and everyone in it. If not for you, we would have been wiped out by those orcs tonight." Many had died, including the young ogre's parents, the chief and his wife. Now, with his father gone, he was the new leader of his people. Following his lead, the old ogre also knelt, bowing his head in a silent display of gratitude. Reinhard looked at the kneeling ogres. They were a proud warrior race, now bowing to him. But he didn't feel like a savior. He had simply cleaned up the mess. "Please," he said, his voice quiet but clear in the sudden silence of the battlefield. "I am not someone you need to kneel for." The red-haired ogre looked up, his crimson eyes filled with a mixture of grief and profound gratitude. "But you. If not for the fallen ogres who fought to protect their homes, I would have arrived too late," Reinhard interrupted gently but firmly. "If anything, I just finished off the orcs. The ones who truly saved your village were all of you." It wasn't false modesty, it was how he truly felt. He had no problem accepting gratitude when it was earned, but he hadn't protected them. He had only avenged them. The red-haired ogre stood up, his gaze locking with Reinhard's. "Still," he said, his voice firm, "we thank you. Now, if I may ask, who are you? And what brought you here? I can try to believe this was a coincidence, but I have a feeling it is not. What do you know about these orcs?" It was a direct, pointed question. He was thankful, but he was also a leader, and a mysterious, impossibly powerful human appearing out of nowhere to save them was anything but a simple coincidence. The old, white-haired ogre beside him looked alarmed. "Young master, you," he began, but the red-haired one cut him off. "Enough, old man, let me speak." He looked back at Reinhard. "Is it?" Reinhard didn't hide the truth. "Imogen," he said directly. "Didn't Imogen stop by your village earlier? I found him in the forest, mumbling about how he was about to achieve something. When he saw me, he showed his anger toward your village, saying how you all turned down his request to be named by him and to serve under him. That's how I knew to come here. After he said that there would be nothing left of the village that denied him." The red-haired ogre's hands clenched into fists, his nails digging into his palms. "Just for that," he snarled, pure rage burning in his eyes. Because I didn't want a name from him, because I didn't want to serve him, just because of that, he sent those filthy orcs to attack our village. His teeth ground together. He looked at Reinhard, his voice now a low, dangerous calm. If I may ask, where is that Majin now? Reinhard shook his head slowly. I understand your anger, but I'm afraid there is no one for you to direct it at. That Majin is no longer alive. I killed him. The ogre's eyes widened. He had to remind himself of what he had just witnessed. This man had wiped out an army with a single attack. Of course he had killed the Majin. He believed him. Is that so? The ogre said, his shoulders slumping slightly. I would have wanted revenge for what he had done, but if he is already dead, then there is nothing I can do. He bowed his head again, this time in a gesture of deep, personal gratitude. Me and my people owe you a debt that I don't think we will ever be able to repay. Thank you, once again. Please, don't mention it, Reinhard said. You don't owe me anything. But the danger hasn't ended yet. There are still orcs in the forest, consuming everything they find. The white-haired ogre spoke up. But didn't the entire orc army come here and die by your attack? It was clearly a massive army, sent to wipe us all out. Reinhard shook his head. It was. But it was merely 5% of their total army. The entire orc army is said to be 200,000 in numbers. What came to attack your village was just 10,000 or something of them. The surviving ogres gasped, their eyes wide with horror at the number. They had been nearly wiped out by just a fraction of the force that had been sent after them. That's impossible, the red-haired ogre said, his voice shaking. 200,000, no orc leader could lead an army that large. How would they even feed themselves? Unless it is a legendary orc lord, young master, the old ogre said, his voice grave. What? But that's just a legend, old man. Nothing more. It seems not, young master, the old ogre replied, his gaze grim. If the numbers are true, it can only be the work of an orc lord. And as for how they are surviving, they have already shown us. They were, eating their own and our dead.